it wasn't that long before the therapist ended up recommending to my parents that they send me to a psychiatrist because I was, pretty extreme. My difficulties were, it wasn't enough to just see a therapist. And so my parents took me to a psychiatrist. My mom took me to my first appointment. And in that first session, I was 14 by this time. In that first session, after sitting down with this woman, this stranger who I'd never met before, I think she'd been given some information about me by my parents and that therapist, but I'd never met her. I poured out all my pain to her. And at the end of that session, she said, "Have you heard of something called bipolar disorder?" And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Well, this anger that you feel, this irritability, these rages you're getting into, these are symptoms of something we call mania. And the despair and the injuring you're doing to yourself, these are symptoms of depression. And this is a condition that you'll have for the rest of your life, but don't worry, there are medications that will help you manage this."
At 14, she told you you were stuck with this for life?
For life. For life. That's how it always is. Anytime you're given a diagnosis by a psychiatrist, the baseline operating assumption is that this thing we call mental illness is an incurable condition that you treat and you manage. But that forms the premise of the entire business model of the psychiatric industry, is that these are incurable conditions that require treatment indefinitely. And there I was hearing this message as a 14-year-old girl. I'm like, excuse my language, I'm like, who the fuck does this woman think she is telling me this?
Exactly.
But that defiance that I felt, I had no one, I knew I couldn't resist, that if I resisted, that would be used against me. So I just kind of went along with it.
I resisted, that would be, it's like you've been taken in by the Bulgarian border police in 1975. Resistance is futile.
Well, it totally is. Well, and interestingly, just to pan out for a moment to this whole broader mental health industry, at scale, that is when many people who resist their diagnosis or who tell their doctors, "I don't think I'm sick," or that's actually is used literally to reinforce just how sick you are. You lack insight, quote unquote, into your condition.
This is so Soviet. I mean, so listening to the patient that's been taken out of the process.
It has, well, in the sense that, of course, the psychiatrist is listening for signs of symptoms. Okay, I'm listening past what they're saying so I can determine if this person is entering a hypomanic episode or her depression is worsening, but they're not listening to the patient. I'll speak for myself. My whole very well-meaning therapists and doctors over the years were not actually listening to me from a premise of me having of me knowing myself better than them, of me having wisdom, of me they lacked a respect for my own ability to kind of define for myself what my reality meant. So
it sounds like they went into the sessions knowing what you were sick with, and everything that you said was confirmation of what they already knew.
Exactly. It's all filtered through this clinical lens of translating your deep human experiences into this clinicalized language of symptom, illness, disease. And so they're trained to do that. And what ended up happening to me when I eventually bought into all of this, by the time I was 18, is I learned how to do that to myself. And I just came to translate every single thought, emotion, behavior, decision through this medicalized lens of me having this sickness that was incurable, and that these were all symptoms of it, basically.
Okay, so you're 14. Can you imagine telling a 14-year-old you have a lifelong illness from which you will never recover, that will define you going forward? At 14, you're telling somebody that. On the basis of what evidence? Where did you catch this illness? In the ladies' room at an airport? Where did they explain where you got this illness?
It's a very good question, Tucker. And it's a question that we should be asking all the time about literally every single psychiatric diagnosis that is ever given to any human being, because the entire model is built on subjectivity. It's built on the subjective observations of the diagnosing clinician, which of course means it will be infused by their own personality, like whether they had a bad night's sleep, they just had a fight with their spouse an hour earlier and they're grumpy. It's going to infuse how they see their patients. There are no objective biological tests. There are no brain scans, lab tests that you can do to say, oh, this is proof that you have this, chemical imbalance in your brain or this, faulty biomarker. There's no objective, measurable pathology of any kind in any of these conditions. Literally, all of them, including the so-called serious ones like bipolar and schizophrenia. It is completely based on observation.
So a new report, which you may not have seen because it was suppressed, shows the abortion pill is 10 times more dangerous than the FDA claims. Not just dangerous to the baby that it kills, but to the women who take it. 11% of women who take the pill experience, quote, serious adverse effects. Why is it still on the market? Because it's abortion related and our leaders love abortion. It'd be easy to turn that figure into a rant about abortion, but there's another angle to this debate that's not talked about enough. And that's what a blessing babies are. People scoff about children like they're some kind of plague, but in reality, the exact opposite is true. On your deathbed, you will care only about your children. They are a gift unlike any other gift. They are the supreme gift. Our friends at Preborn understand this, and they're working around the clock to save as many unborn lives as they can. Their ultrasound helps guide thousands of future mothers to choose life through knowledge. And that's possible because people like you support them. To help, simply dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, the word baby, or visit preborn.com/Tucker. We are proud to partner with Preborn. But is there any explanation for, so they're telling you they're looking forward into the next 70 years of your life and saying this is going to be with you forever, kind of incumbent on them to explain where you got this thing, its nature, like what exactly are they talking about? Did anybody ever explain any of that?
No, and in large part because I never asked. I mean, of course I didn't ask as a kid. I was just so flummoxed by the whole, and disoriented by this whole experience that it didn't even occur to me to be like, can you prove that I have an incurable brain disease? Like it didn't. But honestly, Tucker,
I'm sorry, Lord, to say you have terminal cancer. We can keep you alive for decades, but it's terminal. I mean, that's like so nuts to say that to a child on the basis of no evidence.
But the entire paradigm is that for every single person who has ever been given a psychiatric diagnosis in the history of psychiatric diagnosis, it's always that. It's always just the opinion of the clinician based on his or her, personal orientation. It's the entire thing. And I did not realize this because it never occurred to me to step back and ask these questions. And I think most, maybe I shouldn't presume most, but many people don't either, because when I ended up eventually buying into all of this a few years after that first psychiatrist, as an 18-year-old, I'd continued through high school playing the performance game, knowing it was bullshit, but not knowing how to get out of it. So I ended up getting into Harvard and trying to tell myself, maybe I'm wrong and I will actually feel okay in my skin once I get to Harvard, and I'll just be able to say to myself, like, you were crazy thinking this performance thing is bullshit. Harvard is amazing, and now you're happy. So of course I didn't feel that way when I got there, and I instantly spun out. I started, getting drunk and doing coke and ecstasy and just running away from the reality that I still had no idea who I was. I still didn't feel like I had an authentic self. I still felt trapped in this performance game. So now what do I do? Because I'd been hoping Harvard would save me, and it hasn't. And that pain.
Well, you just won like the #1 merit badge in the world too. You get into, plus you're playing at the highest level in sports.
Yep. Yeah. I was playing on the squash team. I had, on paper, I'd made it. I'd arrived. The pinnacle of what you strive for as a young person within the kind of elite education industry. Like, I won the jackpot. And yet I wanted to kill myself basically every day and saw no point to any of it. And so as I spun out with each through the fall, week after week after week. And I really lost my any footing I might have had. I just lost it all. And I was just a mess and getting myself into all kinds of dangerous, impulsive, really dark situations. I eventually, by wintertime, was just so desperate for relief from this pain that little voice of that psychiatrist all those years earlier is saying, oh, you have this illness called bipolar disorder. I was like, maybe she's right. Like, why do I feel this way? Why can't I get my shit together? Why am I such a mess? Maybe I really am sick. And so it was at that point that I voluntarily went back to psychiatry. I found a psychiatrist at McLean Hospital, which of course, is considered the kind of the golden psychiatric institution, one of the oldest in the country. This
most famous.
Most famous. Yep. Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton,
exactly.
Ray Charles,
Robert
James
Lowell.
Taylor. Oh yeah, they all wrote poems and fiction about their experiences there, and so here I was now, so privileged and blessed to be entering this hallowed psychiatric ground. I was just so excited.
Did it work for Sylvia Plath or Robert Lowell?
I mean, we
not
all
to be
know
mean, but like
it, and a lot of people say that, from what I recall, and someone should, confirm my facts, but from what I remember, years ago reading about Sylvia, I guess she eventually ended up getting electroshock, which, by the way, is still alive and well. 100,000 people a year get electroshock in the U.S. McLean Hospital, on its website a couple years ago, was like bragging about how great its ECT center is. I think Sylvia, what ECT did to her brain and her creativity, I've heard that played a part in why she eventually just couldn't be alive anymore because of the adverse effects of psychiatric treatment. So I knew none of this then. I was just desperate for relief. And I think that desperation is a really important piece of this broader conversation, because as human beings, we can only withstand so much suffering before we need help. We need relief. And that desperation drives you to just accept whatever promise is offered to you, because you're too tired of trying anymore yourself. Just someone take over here. Someone fix me. Someone take this pain away. And that's the place that I got to that freshman year. And I think because of that, it impaired any critical thinking capacities that I might have otherwise had to ask those questions of like, how do you know I have an incurable brain disease? Or can you tell a little bit more, about the evidence base for this drug you're putting me on? None of those questions occurred to me because I didn't care. I didn't care about any of it. I just wanted the pain to stop.
I get it. Yes.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.